Crash, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Gerard, and very well described. How did that first ball miss the stumps?
Ooh.
It just went. It was breathtaking, wasn't it? But you know what? Here's the fearlessness of youth. He came down the wicket after that, Constance, and honestly, how the ball missed his stumps. It must have been a coat of varnish in it. First ball, Scott Boland. We trumped up the big contest between them, hadn't we, last week? We said this will show the selectors whether he's test quality. Then he just coolly came up the pitch and touch gloves with Nick Maddinson as if so that was close. And this is the fearlessness of youth, Gerard, and this is why it's a chance. And this is why I know he's raw and young and green, but you should never dismiss that little impish bravado.
So how important is this innings today, do you think, in the scheme of the next month?
Oh, it's just mega important because here's the thing. Constance scored 2 centuries in last week's Sheffield Shield game against South Australia, but it was South Australia, a relatively undistinguished attack on a flat deck. That is not enough to get him in the test team. It is enough to get him in the discussion. And I know this, Gerard, they are really looking at him. They consider him a live candidate for the first test against India in Perth, but he needs more. If he scores a century today, I think he's almost at the front of the pecking order because no one else is doing much. Cameron Bancroft got a pair in the first game. Marcus Harris, sure, he got a century, but and he's batted for a while yesterday for his 20 or 30, but it's not like they've been tried before. So they're looking for fresh blood in a team where every player could be above 30. I mean, you think of that. We've had teams where there was no players older than 28 and every player above 30 in the Perth Test team. That's what it's going to look like. So they would love to choose a kid. They would love to do it.
They have to balance up. So this is a conservative selection panel. I think we could say that, couldn't we? They don't have their hair blown back easily, and we've got the Fraser McGurk non-selection at the World Cup for that. And you can debate either side of it. So 19 years of age and India, Jasprit Bumrah, I'm sure they would love a soft landing for him, but there are no soft landings in the near future. So if it's to be now, it's going to be bold, isn't it?
Look, it is. And don't forget, there's players in that team that said, for all the talk of Bumrah, Australia talks more about Mohammad Shami. They just can't work him out. Now, he's not playing at the moment, but he's not far away, and he could come back.
Edging short of third slip, Crash, edging short of third slip.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's just, I think your replay's a little bit ahead of me, Gerard, so that ball's coming up on my screen. But this is the alleged weakness of Sam Konstas. Oh, I've just seen it there, yeah. The rival teams really rate him and feel that he's a tremendous little attacking player who never loses his shape when he attacks, but he does go hard at the ball just outside off stump. And against Bumrah, that's his bread and butter. Bumrah loves guys that go hard at the ball outside off stump, and we're just watching a replay now. And Constance half-edged, half-glided that one from Boland, short of third slip. I'm loving this confrontation, Gerard, already. It's only a couple of overs old, but this is what they had to see from Constance. Not against the South Australian attack, but as a proven test match performer on his home track where he reigns supreme. And this will test the kid. He looks a bit uncertain. So already, there's signs that this is a significant upgrade from last week against South Australia.
So inside edge off the pad, flies past Callaway under the helmet, survives, gets off the mark. Konstas is 2. So if you were having a stab at the pecking order right now, before this innings, what do you think the pecking order is?
It's a terrific question. And you know what? I'm not even sure the selectors know the answer to that one. It's just sort of like all cards on the table. I might have Harris just ahead of Constance and just ahead of Bancroft in Western Australia. He bats today. And they are a considerable distance ahead of Matt Renshaw, who averaged 24 last year in Shield. That's not good enough. Henry Hunt made a nice century. I watched it yesterday at Border Field. But, Gerard, Henry Hunt averages 32 in first-class cricket at a strike rate of 41. I'm sorry, you can't put that sort of player in with a slow-moving Usman Khawaja. And that's why Constance is a slightly better chance than we think he is, because he moves relatively quickly. And he appealed for a catch behind, not out.
Not out.
But this is tough times for the kid. Boland's given him a good solid working over. And Gerard, I've got to say this. Aren't you and I just loving an old-fashioned Shield audition for a test spot? And if he shines today, I remember Damien Martin got in the test team one day. He came to the Gabba and scored twin centuries against Craig McDermott, Dirk Tazzler, Andrew Bickle and Michael Kaspovitz, and the selector on duty, John Benno, just reported back to the panel, he's ready. I remember Mark Taylor scoring runs against Merv Hughes in the Shield game in the SCG. It was only about 80 or so, but Laurie Soldier said, yeah, he's handling Merv. Let's go. He's right. And so this is the sort of moment which you and I is fallen before us right now. It's Boland working over Constance. Can he get through it? Does he have the temperament? You know, it's not easy. The wicket's relatively flat, but it's still challenging.
So Beattie doesn't like it. Damn, Gerard, that comment about the most important Sheffield Shield innings this decade, that's up there with Brian Messi. Beattie, give me another one. This is a very rare moment in time where the batting order is not settled. There's a teenager who's coming from the clouds against the established. This is a very rare moment in modern Sheffield Shield cricket. Crash, your references from the past are spot on, but Beattie, give me another one. Give me another innings since the start of this decade that's had the possibility sit on it like this, because I don't reckon there is one.
No, it's a good point, Gerard. And you must remember this. It's a small factor, but it's a big factor. Usman Khawaja turns 38 in December. He will have, I reckon, 1 year max as an international player. So do you really want to be blooding two openers? You know, like sort of, you just... I can see a more like for Khawaja is Bancroft or Harris. But, you know, this is why I think the young kid's a chance, because you can get him in with Khawaja there. So, but there's no... George Bailey was categorical the other day at the press conference. They are not planning for youth at the moment. This is game on series against India and England. Youth can look after itself. If they've got to go old, they'll go old. But it's that they don't. If this was Sri Lanka coming up in 2 weeks' time, Gerard, I've got Konstas 7 out of 10 to play. Right now, I've got him 5 or 4. You know, but if it was a West Indies, I'd have him 8 to play.
So,
but
yeah. So I want to pick that thread up with you, Crash, because this was the contention this time last year. Australia had 7 tests last summer, and they were lesser test matches, and they knew that the next 2 home series were India and England, and they indulged the Warner farewell tour, and then they went on the flight of fancy on Steve Smith at the top, and they finished those 7 test matches without an answer. And it's the same question. It was the same question. I think they wasted last summer, and now they don't have an answer to a question that they knew was going to need to be resolved.
Yeah, it is a fair point, and I've had a couple of people say that to me, that, yeah, David Warner was allowed to retire to go through the summer, and then it left him with only a few tests to experiment, and then they deferred to Steve Smith, which was a sort of, he wanted to move there, and now he wanted to move back. And yeah, it didn't solve the issue. And I think, Gerard, there's something about Steve Smith's decision. I mean, he said, I want to move back to number 4. And it's just all part of the narrative that Steve's just fading a bit. It's not a dramatic fade. He hasn't fallen off a cliff, but he's averaging 30 this year and 40 last year. In his best, he was averaging repeatedly about 3 or 4 seasons over 70. So, you know, he's about 60% of what he was. And for the first time, we're seeing insecurity with him. But openers are hard to find. I listened to Matthew Hayden on a stadium up talking at the Bill Brown Medal the other night, and he made this statement. He said, I never liked Steve Smith moving to opener. He said, openers are a unique bunch. They're a bit weird. And Haydos laughed at himself. But they are. They're different. And they... You know, so they're hard to find. They really are. I mean, And I know the selectors are still categorically have not made a decision on this. They are really open mind. George Bailey's landed in Brisbane. He will look at Renshaw bat today. I don't believe Renshaw is in contention. Bancroft will be monitored in Perth. He's slow moving too. You know, has he improved since he was the last Test player? I'm not sure.
Are we? Where are we? Are they definitely going to pick an opener?
It looks like it.
Yeah.
It looks like it. And I get the other side. Cameron Green's out. Hey, do you pick another all-rounder? No. I reckon this should be their
Trouble. Boland's got Konstas LBW.
Oh, well, that's coming up in my screen, this ball, Gerard. So thank you for alerting me. And I'll just watch this. I'm loving this, but here it is. Okay, here's the ball. Yep. No, well, there you go. I would say now Konstas falls back in the queue. I really do, because Boland gave him a solid working over in just a couple of overs. There was 3 or 4 false shots. And, you know, let's be candid about it. That's Jasprit Bumrah for you. He bowled in a very Bumrah line today and was clearly beaten doing nothing more than playing defensively with a straight bat. He got him on the inside and that was out. So, you know, that's I'm just going to watch it now in slow motion. Yeah. Oh, actually, he was heading towards leg stump, but a defensive straight bat. So, you know, the best of his defence could not keep out Scott Boland. So you'd have to ask about Bumrah. So I'm not saying his position is beyond retrieving if he comes out in the second innings and makes 140. But, yep, it's this was his example and he's failed. So this is decisive. It really is. Yeah. Don't underestimate the worth of this innings. We talked it up, didn't we?
We did.
Him versus Boland, the old MCG magician, and he looked vulnerable from ball 1.
2 from 10 balls, Konstas, LBW, Boland. Significant. Now, Bancroft will bat later today in Perth. Gerard, I've organised an off-site meeting and rushed to the G to see the kid bat. There are more here than you would expect for a Monday Shield game. Magnificent seeing the young Tyro having to deal with the old pro, and the old pro got him. 0433 98 11 16. I want to run 2 other things past you, Crash, on this conversation. One, it bothered me that as soon as the Green injury hit, Australia didn't know who its next best batter was. I think you should know the answer to that. And it doesn't have to be in a position, but the 7th best batter in the country should be a declared commodity.
Yep. It's so true. And one of the reasons is that the batters, Gerard, are not throwing up the numbers that they used to. You grew up in an era where there was Mike Hussey averaging 50 and couldn't get a test. Darren Lehman was averaging 50 and waiting on the outer for years. Matthew Hayden was averaging 60 at one point and couldn't get a go. Whereas the wickets were so incredible, you know, they just dominated. But over the last 3 or 4 years, the wickets have been very spicy and the batting numbers have been down. Now, I reckon, have you seen the results of the Sheffield Shield this year and all the centuries in the last week since the competition started? It sounds to me as if there's been a directive from Cricket Australia for flatter decks. There's been a lot of centuries, and it's been common theme. There are several draws, a lot of tons, a lot of bowlers producing big numbers. So I sense that there's a feeling around the country to make life easier for batsmen in the Sheffield Shield. But one of the problems they're having, there's just not the quality. And they're hard to pick. I mean, guys like Bancroft and Harris, they've been tried at Test cricket and have not managed a century between them. And what's disturbing about Harris is that he's not bad, Gerard, but he's made this string of scores above between 20 and 40. Which worries you because that's when he should be getting going, you know? So yeah, it is. You're right. We didn't know the next best batsman. Is he an all-rounder? Is he an opener? But, Gerard, just quickly on the all-rounders thing, I think you can get through as an all-rounder with Mitchell Marsh, not bowling in the nets, just bowling in a game, bowling about 6 overs a day. Marnus Labuschagne bowled 13 overs yesterday in a Sheffield Shield game. To me, he's working up to something, medium pace. I'm not sure whether George Bailey spoke to him, who's made the decision himself, but he wants to bowl medium pace in a test, I reckon.
Yes.
There you go, as he wants to do everything.
Yep.
And then there's 3 overs, so four overs from Marnus, 3 from Travis Head. There's your all-rounder if you need one.
I think there's still a world in which Marnus opens, Smith bats 3, and the new batter comes in the middle order. I just want to close our conversation there. I still think there's a world where that happens if none of them can nail down convincingly and thoroughly the opening position.
Yeah, and if that person is likely to be Nathan McSweeney, the South Australian captain, raised in Queensland, plays for the Brisbane Heat. He scored a century and a 50 last week. It was pretty anonymous, really. And then he scored 30-odd yesterday. I went and saw him back. He looked okay. He's got a batting average in the mid-30s. He's in his mid-20s. He's just the sort of player from that lost generation that has no one in the team. And a mature kid, they like him. They've made him Australia A captain. And he's a chance of being a future Australian captain because he's a wise head. The panel have name-dropped him a couple of times without anyone talking about it. George Bailey has said, McSweeney's an impressive player. So he would be a chance. Maybe Marnus does open. He's never... Gerard, can I tell you a funny story?
Yep.
When we were at the Gabba last year, I actually raised Marnus's name as an opener, and I saw Usman Khawaja in the lunch break. And what I like about Khawaja is he's very straight. And he said, "Where'd you get that from?" And I said, "I just sort of thought a good idea." And he goes, "Good idea?" He said, "He's got opening-itis. He doesn't want to open." You know what I mean? And it was sort of quite funny. The boys in the box are watching this exchange, and I was trying to defend myself. But I like that about Khawaja. He just calls it straight. He said, "That's a dumb idea." So I've sort of dropped off it since then, I have many of my ideas, Gerard.
I'll pick up the dumb idea.
No, hey, do you know what? That's actually quite a nicely balanced team. If you moved Labuschagne up to open, but the interesting thing about Labuschagne is he hasn't want to open, and yet to start his Test career, when Greg Chappell approached him, they were playing India as well at the SCG. They were short a number 3 batsman, and a couple of guys said, "I don't really want to bat there." And Greg went up to Labuschagne and said, "I don't suppose you want to bat 3, do you?" He said, "I would love to go up to number 3. I bat there for my club, Redlands. Let me do it. I can do it." And Chappell loved it. He just thought it was fantastic. He just said, "God, I love this guy's attitude." He said, "I'm still not sure about his future, but wow, what an attitude." But he hasn't got that attitude to opening, which seems funny, even though they're only one position apart in the order.
Yeah. So some of your thoughts. Hi, fellas. Watching Konstas live still looks raw against Boland. Selectors will have to go with Harris for the first test. He's been there before. Looks the safest, albeit not the perfect bet to start. That's from Brett. Jim Bob in Heathmont. What a shame about Konstas. Maybe it's because he's just another New South Welshman. Kidding. He still has a second inning, so I wish him well. I can hear the devastation in your voices, gunning for another New South Wales player. Come on, Cam Bancroft. That's Ange, Freo mum from Perth. Marnus thinks he can do anything and everything. Now Queensland captain, now first change medium pace, whatever. So why can't he open? Solve a problem. Darryl from Reservoir. Not a silly idea. Smith is in at number 3 for New South Wales right now. Gavin from Albury. That Nathan McSweeney goes all right. Maybe he's the 7th best batter in the country at the moment. What about Bo Webster? Surely he might get a game. That is from Mark. So that's the cross-section of the way that you are thinking. We are living this live through the wisdom and experience of Robert Craddock. I did rather like this, Crash. Trenton on the Sunshine Coast sent us this. The Berlin Wall was still up the last time New Zealand won in India. Monumental win by the Black Caps. It was monumental, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Gerard, to bowl a team out for 46 in the first innings was spellbinding. I just couldn't believe it. And then to score 400, then to see India come back and play this irrepressible brand of cricket. But finally, they were set about 110 to win the match. They got their 2 wickets down. And I'm loving the rest of this series. There's 2 more tests to go. And there is so much that Australia can learn about that first innings of 46. I tell you, Rohit Sharma's come out after the test and said, "We will attack from all positions. That is our brand of cricket. When you're cornered, you go hard." And I love the way Matt Henry bowled. He took 5 for, just wobbled the seam a bit, kept the pressure on and say, hey, if you want to come at us, come at us. You know, go your hardest. But I think this Indian team can be the victim of their own ego. No doubt about that. They think they're good enough to attack in a baseball sort of way sometimes, and it can get them into severe problems.
It was reckless batting through the first session. So I don't know whether there's any comfort in it. I watched the second innings of that game when they batted the second time around, and Sarfraz Khan made his first Test century. So what timing for him. Rishabh Pant made he made 99. He's got 7 scores in the 90s. It's an amazing record for all that he's done. When they were going together, it just put the frighteners up at 462 and 100 overs. So they were both, weren't they? They were both in the same Test match.
They were. And Rishabh's the guy. I know he's your favourite cricketer. He's the guy Australia just feel he scares them because they can't plan for him. He just hits the ball anywhere and everywhere, and he can be a different player every day. He's quite something. And I love the character that he is, you know. And I actually kept a screenshot some time ago of Rohit Sharma did a photo of Rishabh's hotel room, and there was pads flying everywhere. There was room service trays. You half expect to see a wild animal roam out of it. Like he's Mr. Dishevelled behind closed doors, but can't he bat? God, you know. And so this is the challenge. But I'm still not convinced. If New Zealand can continue and win this series, India have not lost a home series for 12 years. I think it's something like 18 straight they've won in a row since England got them in 2012. So it's just they play like that too. They play with impunity as if say, oh, we'll find a way. Guess what? They didn't.
Yep. I think they're such an interesting study. And you're right, is 2 more tests. They're having the test match preparation for the summer, which is interesting as well. New Zealand's remarkable win in India to start that series. The wisdom and experience of Robert Craddock. It cued an amazing set of results for New Zealand, didn't it? And the T20 World Cup in the women's is in their grasp.
Yeah, absolutely, Gerard. And, you know, it was... When I was just listening to the Ian Smith's reaction and to what was a fabulous win, isn't it amazing how New Zealand are a force against every other nation except Australia?
Yes.
Like we've only got to say boo, and suddenly they quiver in their boots, the Kiwis. I don't even know why it is, but what is it? 2 Test wins against us in the last 30 years. It's incredible. But at the women's event, the T20 World Cup, what a story that is. They had lost their last 10 games before entering the T20 World Cup, and somehow blazed their way through the tournament and beat South Africa in the final. South Africa, of course, had beaten Australia in the semis, which was, you know, totally unexpected. I feel Australia played a little bit conservatively when they batted first. They were only 5 wickets down at the end for 140-odd, and that just wasn't nowhere near enough. They were it was probably 15, 20 runs shy. But this is great for world cricket. Australia had won 6 of the 8 world T20 titles. They dominated everything. And, you know, I'm just watching all the news reports coming out of New Zealand. They have loved this victory. And even South Africa, even though they didn't win it, just getting to the final, a mate of mine in South Africa said that's just created a tidal wave of publicity over there. It's great for the women's game. It really is.
Do you think, from an Australian perspective, it will lead to introspection, or will it just be seen as the price of doing business? Rare though it is that Australia wouldn't make the final of that comp.
Yeah, a little bit of both, but mainly the second one, Gerard. I think you can't win everything, and you know they've dominated like few in an All Black sort of way of rugby union. But the All Blacks, even when they're at the top, they never won every World Cup, you know, and you can't win everything. So I think they'll be that. They will. There's a lot of good youngsters coming through. And it is true, like it's nearly time for the older generation, like Elisa Healy, Elise Perry and people like that they will gracefully exit probably over the next few years. But there's plenty of systems. And Australia spends more on women's cricket than any other nation. And money means systems, and systems means results. So that's why I don't see any need to panic. But just watching the box here, Gerard, 2 quick observations.
Yep.
On Sam Konstas v. Scott Boland. 1, hey, you don't reckon it came through in the text messages. You don't reckon the Victorians would have loved that, getting the New South Wales Wonder Boy cheaply, because there's been this feeling, and it came through in the text, as in Victorians thinking, oh, like David Hook said, not another New South Wales Wonder Boy that has to score 250s in a row and suddenly he's Don Bradman. You know what I mean? Yes. Hook's his whole statement that in New South Wales, when you get your blue caps, you get a green one as well, because you're going to get it eventually. Of course, you play for New South Wales. So I reckon in the team huddled there, Gerard, there would have been a little bit of, oh, well, we see him come, we see him go. And the second thing is, we forgot this when we were talking earlier, but this match is also very important for Scott Boland. He's the next man in the queue outside the Test team with Michael Neser. And so it's a real little feather in his cap that he's bowled 5 very nice overs for 15. And even at age 35, you know what? He's still Scott Boland. He's still nagging away on off stump and just outside. And I think that is a formula that can work against India. And I do think he will be called on throughout the series. It may be one test. I went through a stage I never thought he'd play again. But even just in this last half an hour watching him, he's ready, Boland. He looks on a flat deck, he looks good.
He must play the MCG test. I think.
Yep.
Yeah. Australia is wedded to its big 4 bowlers, which I get. But the way India have manipulated their bowling across lengthy series, both home and abroad, that's the model. I think Australia across 5 tests against India are going to need to be strategic and not just send the 4 out over and over and over again.
And I think they know that, Gerard, because when Rishabh Pant ripped him apart on the last day at the Gabba last tour, they later that night over beers, there was chats among selectors and senior players that we thought it was a good idea to keep the same group together, but they were getting a bit tired. And now they're a few years older. It makes so much sense. What is ironic is that the backup bowlers, Boland and Neser, are 35 and 34.
Yes.
Lance Morris is treading water. They're a little bit concerned about Jai Richardson. And, it is incredible, isn't it, the age of the team? England will be looking at Australia and thinking, next year in Australia, they should be gettable, this team. They would actually be hoping that the Australian team holds on for next year so that they might be able to prize a few holes in the damn wall. Players might be too old then. But I'm looking at England's attack, Gerard, and it's for me, I just can't see how that attack gets Australia out. No Anderson, no Broad. They did, really well to beat Pakistan, but in the first test and lost the second. But I just don't see the quality in the England bowlers at the moment.
Yep, you and I are like-minded on that.